Hello and welcome to Connect and Collaborate. I am Alex Hopkins, your on-air producer, and I am very excited for today. We are talking with John Milton from WorldDenver. We're going to talk about a program that you guys have. It's the Cultural Exchange Program. But you have two guests with you. We have Steve Holloway. He is the Branch Chief of Health Access at the Colorado Department of Health. Welcome.
Thank you.
Yes. And also Jeff Popiel. He is the president at Geotech, as well as sitting on the board for World Trade Center Denver. How are you doing, Jeff?
Doing great, thanks.
Wonderful. Well, John, thank you for bringing me these wonderful guests to give us this great insight on this cultural exchange program. So I'm going to let you kick it off and talk about the program and why we should know more about it.
Okay, great. Well, Alex, thank you very much first for having us here. Again, my name is John Milton. I'm a program assistant with WorldDenver. We're a local nonprofit. And we are working with a J1 program, which is facilitated by the U.S. Department of State. It's a cultural exchange program. Again, it's geared towards obtaining business experience for foreign nationals, meaning people not born in the U.S., and for facilitating cultural exchange. Wonderful.
So you mentioned J1. That is not a term I'm familiar with. Do you mind explaining that in a little more detail for me?
Yes. Well, again, it's a program run by the U.S. Department of State. It's technically a visa, but how it works is the best way I've come to describe it is it works a lot like studying abroad.
Okay.
So you're in college and you spend a semester in Spain. You go there, you learn about the culture, you learn about the history, and take those experiences back home. It improves your experience of Spain, of just the world, broadens your horizons. It works a lot like that in that foreign nationals come to the United States, work for an organization, obtain that American business experience, obtain that American business culture, then take those skills back to their home country. It's beneficial for them because gaining that American business experience just puts them on another level. And it's able to establish international connections for both the foreign national and the U.S. organization. And so the other benefit for U.S. businesses is it gets them access to an international pool of talent, brings typically young people in who can think outside the box. And when they go back to that home country, again, it creates that international connection where, if you're an organization that maybe wants to expand to China or to India, if you have a J1 from China, you can pick up the phone and call them and say, hey, can you tell me about this industry or this market, or what do you know about this? So it's a lot more personal. It's a lot more a better established connection that way.
Wonderful. So what kind of students are we looking at? Or are we even looking at students? Are we looking at adults? Who does this program pertain to as far as bringing foreign nationals here?
Right. Typically, it's people my age, mid-20s to early 30s, young students, or either people kind of just out of college, getting their first couple of years of experience, getting their feet wet. And typically, a J1 can almost be anything. It doesn't hit hard in the arts. I wouldn't say anything like literature or music or anything, but it's typically the hard fields. I'd say anything STEM or big business, manufacturing, production, chemicals, marketing, business analytics, management, things like that is where most of them are going to fall.
Okay. So as a business then, what would I need to do? What am I looking for?
Right. Well, it's split into two phases. There's host, and then there's sponsor. Now, WorldDenver works on behalf of an organization called Cultural Vistas. They're based out of Washington, D.C. We work as sponsor, and we would take care of a lot of the visa, a lot of the immigration, to short-term immigration, things like that. And the host would be where the person would go to work every day. So it depends on your needs. Again, if you're more than 5 full-time employees, if you've got an operating budget above $3 million, things like that, and you want to expand overseas, if you want to experience that culture you never would have had before, or if you just we want a fresh perspective. We've got maybe bringing someone from India. We know they're doing things different. We can learn from them. They can learn from us.
Wonderful. And I was checking out the website before you got in here, and I was looking. There's a phenomenal list of people that you've had come through this program. There's another program. It's the IV
LP.
LP.
Yes.
And Margaret Thatcher and
yes.
Gandhi.
Tony Blair.
Yeah, and Tony Blair have done this. What? So you've got. I know this is a little different than the program that we're talking about. But those are some big names to have for WorldDenver.
Yeah, the IVLP program, it's the flagship exchange program with the U.S. Department of State. Again, it's geared towards people mid-career, who the U.S. expects to be leaders in their fields and their industries and in government and economics, things like that. Very short term, okay. I'd say maybe a month tops.
Oh.
They come to the U.S., hit Washington, D.C. pretty much all the time, but then go to different cities around the U.S. folks in what they're focusing in. So Denver gets a lot of green energy, a lot of coal mining, a lot of people like that. Okay. They come here for a few days, 2 or 3. WorldDenver facilitates meetings with organizations around Denver, like you do with cross-cultural education, and then they move on to the next city and go home. It's similar in some ways to the J1 program. Again, it's for people mid-career, very established. Again, you don't apply for it, we come find you.
Okay.
That's how it works.
Okay.
But the J1, it's like that, but for younger people, longer term, I would say. And just doing one thing. And with IVLP, you might meet anywhere from 30 to 50 organizations throughout your whole trip through the United States, where J1 is just one.
Okay. And to compare, again, that's 1 month for the IVLP, whereas how long is the J1?
It all depends on the host organization.
Okay.
So you can do a minimum of 3 weeks, a maximum of 18 months.
Wow.
Now, there are other mechanisms to stay longer. It's not impossible. It's not easy.
Right.
But again, yeah, 3 weeks to 18 months is the span. In my experience, I've seen, again, working with students a lot, semester, 4, 5, 6 months. But there are times they stay for a year.
Wonderful. Well, do you have any information from these students any great feedback, I guess I should be asking?
Right.
Yeah. Tell us what feedback you're getting from the students.
Right.
Yeah.
I might have to pass that over to my testimonials.
Okay.
That's why I asked them to come today.
Oh, wonderful.
They've got so much more experience with this than I do and have hosted themselves, and I'll just turn it over.
All right. Well, Steve, before you get into the testimonial from your feedback from students, let's talk about your experience with this program.
Sure. So I administer programs at the State Health Department that are related to improving access to care in parts of Colorado that are typically poorly served by the mainstream of healthcare systems. So that often can mean rural non-resort communities or certain low-income, underserved urban communities. So we have a host of programs that relate to improving workforce capacity in those areas. We know that healthcare is actually a great economic driver, and in fact, in most rural counties in the state, it's not agricultural or extraction industries, it's healthcare industries that lead the economy in these communities. And it's sort of an essential component to a healthy local economy, particularly when you're talking about communities that are off the Front Range. So we administer programs that help bring more clinicians into those communities so people can stay and work and shop and receive health care in the community they live in, as opposed to traveling great distances to get that care. The J1 program that we administer at the health department allows us to act as an interested governmental authority to certify that a J1 trained physician is willing to practice in the public interest for a period of 3 years. And if they're willing to do that, they receive a waiver of their home return requirement of 2 years. So a J1 is, as we've already heard, an educational visa. And the idea is cultural exchange and to bring individuals from around the world into the United States to learn American education and values, and then redistribute those ideas across the world. A physician who would like to stay in the United States can receive a waiver of that return requirement by petitioning us to do that work. So we write a letter based on a fairly comprehensive application to the U.S. Department of State and certify that that clinician is willing to work in an underserved area. They make a contact with an employer who's willing to sponsor them, and then that physician can go to work for that period of 3 years. Oftentimes they'll stay quite a bit longer than that. That's essentially how the program works for us.
Wonderful. And how about your experience, Jeff?
Yeah, so at Geotech we've been involved with the J1 work program through a group called ISEC, and it's a student exchange organization. So like John mentioned, it's students are recent graduates, and so we'd start off taking students on their summer breaks, about a 12-week to an 18-month type program. So we've trended towards, instead of doing the summer, is doing a year and a half long program, because it's a lot deeper. Someone, if they're staying here in the United States for a longer period of time, they get a greater benefit from that versus, over the summer is almost like a longer vacation where they get to experience all seasons, all the holidays, all those experiences. And then on the work side, they've got a chance to really dig in on some projects for us. So we've hosted, I was just adding up here, 18 different students from other countries, or recent graduates from other countries, and over the last few years, and it's been a great opportunity for us to localize our products as we try to export internationally, both from a cultural and translation perspective, but also just getting extra people working and getting involved in the company. So one of the things we didn't realize that would be the cultural economic benefit was that to the folks we have here in Denver. We have 100 employees here on site, and not all of them have left the United States to other parts of the world. And if they have, it's most commonly, like most Americans, get to Canada or Mexico, but you don't get much further than that. And so having someone coming from the Middle East or from Asia to come and work for a period of time, it gives that a cultural experience to the other folks in the company as well. They're inviting them over to different holidays or holiday meals, or everybody's arguing over gets to have them over Thanksgiving or Christmas, and they really get a chance to experience our culture as well.
Wonderful. I guess that is an unexpected side effect, right? Yes, we want to show them American culture and American business practices, but they bring their culture along with them as well, and so it's a little bit of exchange there. That's really nice.
Yeah, if you think about it from that perspective, it's a program run by the State Department, and other countries have similar programs. So oftentimes you'll hear maybe a critic of a program like this say, oh, you're taking a job or an opportunity away from an American. And it's not true, because most of these organizations are helping place Americans overseas for similar opportunities. So they're reciprocal programs, and the whole basis of that between the state departments of the countries around the world is to create that opportunity for a young person to have a dynamic cultural exchange, and they'll have a different worldview. And so when they're looking at different topics as they relate to politics or trade or different conflicts, is how can you work together to have a peaceful solution. So if you know and understand a person and a country and a culture better, you're more able to connect with them in a way to find a solution versus it's easy to hate something that's completely unknown. But once you've known and met someone, or you've traveled or lived there, you're going to look for a win-win solution to go forward, not just a conflict.
I love that. Yeah, it's an interesting point that you bring up, because I'm sure you get a lot of flack for a lot of people thinking that, well, we have lots of students here that need internships, right? And so thinking about this exchange program, so do we send a lot of our students back over too? I know that you've mentioned that as a practice. Is that something you both found within this program?
Well, I would, again, compare it to studying abroad. Now, I work only on the bringing in aspect. I can't give you a number of how many people go out, but it's definitely a reciprocal program, and it's good in other ways for American businesses, because it's a good recruitment tool too. If you're a tech startup, with no shortage of tech startups in Denver, and that's just because we're such a good city for that. If you have, you need an engineer, you need a software engineer, a technician, anything like that, you may be getting outbid by 50% for some of the bigger companies. You just can't get your people in. Well, what you can do is you can bring in a J1 from India, from China. That's where it's India, China, Mexico, Canada is where most of them come from. Now, they can come from anywhere, but that seems to be the big four. Bring them in for 18 months to fill a position, and then during that time, extend your recruitment process to really bring someone in after they leave. So I can't really comment on the how many of our U.S. citizens are going abroad. Again, I know it's reciprocal, but it's to say that we're taking jobs, it's not true. It's a great recruitment tool. It can be utilized in that way too.
Have you utilized it as a recruitment tool, or thoughts on that?
Well, sure. So I can't speak to how many U.S. Students are going abroad for similar programs. So we are a receptive program, and that we administered this waiver process. But what I will say is that the placements of our J1 visa waiver physicians are in areas that are defined as a shortage of healthcare professionals. So healthcare employers around the state spend a great deal of money trying to recruit to vacant positions, and certain areas of the state are simply more difficult to recruit to than others. So employers can spend a great deal of money. Certain physician subspecialties might cost as much as $100,000 in recruitment costs to attract physicians into those communities to provide care to the community. So by definition, these are areas of the state that's difficult to recruit for U.S. trained physicians. And this is one of the many tools that we have available through the health department and other programs to help those healthcare employers be able to recruit to those positions. And the value of our program is that it really is a short-term immigration benefit that costs the employer no money at all. That physician can come in and sort of satiate a community need for that clinical capacity to meet the needs of the community, and we reduce the costs of recruitment and retention for those employers long term. So they're ultimately spending less money to stay fully staffed in their clinic facility. And as a result, we have more capacity. Again, people can stay in their communities to get the health care that they need. And I will say that there is some benefit to that cultural exchange. So, for example, we've recruited clinicians from Spanish-speaking countries, and I can think of an example recently of a physician that had trained in Mexico City. She'd come to the United States for her residency program and decided that she'd like to stay, and began to work in West Denver, which is an area that has a higher number of Spanish-speaking individuals, and so she was able to deliver care in Spanish more effectively than a U.S. physician maybe, where there is more of a language barrier. And so it was really an opportunity to improve the health status of those patients, to provide better care in that clinic facility, to give this clinician an opportunity to stay and work in the United States and really deliver care that otherwise is difficult to fill.
That's, yeah, what a great story. These are the testimonials you were talking about. Yeah, I think that's absolutely lovely that we're able to have these people fill jobs, right? And at a low cost to employers, they are cutting out that recruitment, as you mentioned, could be upwards of $100,000 in your field at least.
Correct.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit more about, from a business perspective, and you gave a great testimonial there with less cost, but if I were in, say, another STEM field, right, what would be your pitch, so to speak, on why this is beneficial for me in the long term?
Right. Well, the first thing that comes to mind is manufacturing. Now, China's a big manufacturing hub. A lot of manufacturing going on there. You may do your manufacturing in China. You know, that's when I meet American organizations that make things or produce products. First thing I say is, do you do your own manufacturing? And most of the time, it's no. We outsource to China. So what you could do is, to gain a better understanding of the whole logistic process, is you get a J1 from China, bring them over, say, you know, what's it like on the other side of the ocean? How is it going over there? When we say this, what are you hearing? It's good for other organizations, you know, if you, or for Chinese organizations, it's good too. Let's say we had one specific example of, it was a chemical plant, and they wanted one of their individuals to gain some American business experience. So we were able to place him here with an organization, so we could then go back to China and say, this is how the U.S. is doing it. You know, we've got some ideas. They've got some different ideas. It's just sharing that information. It's also good for, let's say, I know this is how the reciprocal process works. Let's say you're an organization that just outsourced to another part of the world. You have a branch over there, or you've got some type of industry over there. You take one of your people and have them do the reciprocal process over there, have them train them up, say, this is how we do it. You know, we don't want to start from the ground up. We're going to bring someone from headquarters in, and then that person comes back, and then another person comes over and then is trained at headquarters most of the time at the same time. So they basically switch.
Okay.
You know, the U.S. person goes over, train it, the branch manager comes, trains in the U.S., and then they go back. So it's good for, you know, just that communication, that cultural efficiency. Things like that. It's just you can't beat that, being there, being on the ground, and communicating in real time.
Right. Well, and besides the fact of, if I'm a large enough corporation to be able to put another company in China or Mexico or Canada, one might say that you're essentially losing money in the long run if you're sending people back out to their home countries, right? So thoughts on that? I know we've covered it a little bit, but the cold hard facts are, you know, that's what somebody's going to think in the long run.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I would just say, again, it's great for those international connections. You know, I go to so many networking events a week just to meet people in Denver to find the need. So you make that connection, again, where you can pick up the phone and say, hey, I'm interested to know about this, or can you introduce me to this person? You were a J1 with us, 10 years ago. I've seen you've moved to this company. Can you connect me to their HR person? So again, it's you do lose an employee. You put that that training in, you build them up and onboarding, and then they go home. But you don't really lose that investment. It's not like, I guess you can always choose to never talk to that person again, but I just don't believe that's the case.
Yeah.
And especially you can pick. It's not like you have to enter the J1 lottery saying I just want one from wherever. You can say I want one from Canada. A lot of oil and gas companies are in Colorado. A lot of coal mining companies are in Colorado, and that's the same case for Canada. I want someone from Edmonton to come here, so when they go back, we can expand to Edmonton, or at least network in Edmonton, things like that.
Okay, so you do have that opportunity
Yes.
to choose specifically where you would like someone to come from.
Yes, and again, Canada and parts of India are very attractive, just the English language skill. Mm-hmm. There's millions and millions of people in India. English is their first language. Mm-hmm. Canada, I have relatives in Canada. I can tell you the same thing for Canada. A lot of it's English. So those are going to be the most attractive, but the State Department does have process in place where people coming from anywhere are going to speak English. They have to pass an English proficiency test. There's accents are always a thing. I'm from the South. I've got a little bit of an accent. But that's if anyone coming, they will be able to speak English.
Okay. Well, and that so much wasn't my concern. I'm thinking for actual industries, right? As you mentioned, China has a huge manufacturing industry, and so that I have a manufacturing business. I want to make sure I'm getting somebody with at least a little bit of exposure to that kind of industry. It is nice to know that everyone does speak English, just to make that transition a little bit easier. But also bringing in their own languages, right, for fields that taps into. I know that Spanish is spoken a lot all over the States, right? And so it's nice to be able to recruit people from Mexico to fill in those territories where interpretation isn't always easy to get to, particularly in the healthcare sector.
For sure, and all the clinicians that enter into and participate in our program have to go through a number of steps that sort of demonstrate that they have an equivalent medical knowledge to a U.S. trained physician, and among them is English language proficiency. We also administer a test. We, not the health department, but the system administers a test called USMLE, which is just to demonstrate that there is sufficient medical knowledge gained from another country. And then all these clinicians are also licensed to practice in the state of Colorado. So there's sort of 3 standards that assure that they are delivering care that is equivalent to a U.S. trained physician.
Which, that's very important to note, right? And that has to go for every industry. You have to have a little bit of certification, right, for any industry that you go into. Have you had any thoughts on that as far as the Geotech field or World Trade Center Denver?
Well, I think from our perspective, we're looking at utilizing the folks on the J1 program to help us export the products that we manufacture here to other countries, like even China. So when we had our interns from China, they're helping us doing our translations. And so even though these interns have gone back home, our Chinese website still lives on. And then when we've gone to China to visit again, they've helped and met to help with translations and setting up meetings and logistics and stuff like that. So it's really an expansion of your network to just not be locally here, but your network's just more diverse, and it feels like a small world when you can travel halfway around the world and meet friends.
That is really exciting. And on that note, we're going to take a quick break here on Connect and Collaborate. Be sure to like and subscribe our YouTube page while you're here. Find this podcast and more at cobrt.com/radio-podcast. And where can I find more information?
Yes. Well, my contact info is on worlddenver.org under our team. You can always email me at John, John, at WorldDenver, WorldDenver.org. I'm always happy to get new emails.
Wonderful. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back to Connect and Collaborate. Once again, I'm Alex Hopkins, your on-air producer, and we are talking with John Milton from WorldDenver about his cultural exchange program that he's got going on. And once again in the studio, as a refresher, we have Steve Holloway with the branch chief for health access at the State Health Department in Colorado, as well as Jeff Popiel. He is the president of Geotech and also sits on the board for World Trade Center Denver. And we're having a pretty cool conversation here about this cultural exchange program, and I put you guys under some flack, you know, a little bit, trying to make sure that businesses really understand the value of this program and why they might want to get involved. But while we're on that page, John, I'm going to ask you, you mentioned on the commercial break here that there are some requirements that a business has to have before they can be considered for this program. So let's talk about those requirements and what I need to have, so because myself as an entrepreneur might not be able to be qualified for this.
Right. I'm really happy you brought that up. So again, we want these people to go to established businesses. We want them to get the best experience in American business and in American culture they can. Now, the hurdles aren't very high. It's just the State Department wants to know they're going to a reputable place. So just some of the, just simple qualifications are 5 full-time employees. So that's just, it's a lot of small nonprofits, a lot of small startups can still make this hurdle. If that's not the case, when we want $3 million in operating revenue, it's just, there's a future planned out, there's a definite source of income, and that, they can invest in products and in people and in events. One of the most important things I would say is that it has to be a commercial office. We worked with one organization that we thought would be a great fit, but the individual said, well, I work from home. Well, we can't do that. Another thing is there has to be an on-site supervisor. And that's just because if, the J1 individual needs to go ask a question, they're not emailing, they're not calling, they can walk down the hallway and say, hey, I have a question. There is a maximum of 25% admin work. So emails are okay. We don't mind that, but these are very intelligent, very highly trained, very motivated people that we don't want them to go be getting coffee and running copies all day.
So what a typical intern would do at 18 probably in the States for a lot of large corporations.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're actually getting hands-on experience.
Absolutely. That's really the biggest part of it is they want that hands-on. Honestly, they want dirty hands. Now, literally in some cases, like, if you're working for a agricultural company, yes, dirty hands. But again, just very much involved in the process, very much involved in the operation. They really gain that operational awareness that is good for the business and that they can take back to their home country. I spoke with one nonprofit. They said, we're a little small. I said, how many? He said, we're 5. And I said, well, okay, you just made the cutoff. But, we work a lot. We're a lot bigger than what we look. So if they come here, they'll have to do a little bit of everything, a little bit of marketing, a little bit of finance, a little bit of fundraising, a little bit of operations support, a little bit of admin. And I said, perfect.
Yeah.
That is great. Honestly, the more they can do in this time, the better. And that's, again, full-time. We want them to be full-time. If they're coming here, we don't want them to do 15 hours a week. We want anywhere between 30 and 40 hours. They don't have to be paid. Now, they can take paid internships with a requirement, but the individual has a choice too. And if you pay them, you're just going to get a lot more people. You open up yourself to a bigger talent pool than unpaid because in some situations, they're working for a company that wants them to go into J1, and they say, we'll pay for your housing, we'll pay to get you there, we'll keep paying you your salary, but that's not the case for everyone. Some of them are paying out of pocket because they see the value of this American business experience. So some of them say, I've got to be paid, or else I've got to have some type of stipend. I've got to at least get my housing covered. So it just all depends on, what the organization can offer and what the individual needs.
Awesome. So let me, just a sidebar here. I guess I didn't even take housing into consideration, really. Do you find that you have some families that will host, or is
Yes.
that all up into the individual who decides to join the J1 program?
It depends on the organization. So it can work both ways. It can work with, the reason we're on the air today is to inform people about this and say, hey, that's interesting. I might want to do that. Well, then we can discuss housing, and we can discuss, if they're going to cover their own costs, or if you're going to set them up with an apartment, or they can go live with a member of your organization. But in some cases, companies say, we already know who we want. We found this person. We want them to come over. We need help with the visa sponsorship, which is where we come in. And I say, okay, well, tell me about housing. They say, we've already got it set up. We've already talked to a member. We've already got their housing covered. We've already set that. All we need help is getting this person here. So a lot of time it depends on the organization.
Wonderful. And speaking of that, so you mentioned that most J1 programs are anywhere from 3 weeks to 18 months.
Right.
But going back on the healthcare sector, you mentioned that if they are doing a doctor program, it's 3 years.
So typically the residency period for a physician, yes, is a 3-year residency. Some can be as long as 5 years. And the physicians that come in for a J1 educational visa will typically have that period of time to complete that residency, essentially demonstrate a U.S. equivalent medical education. And then that home return requirement is really what triggers that exchange of culture. And really where the health department and my role comes into play is that we give that physician an opportunity to stay in the United States and waive that home return requirement if they are willing to practice in that underserved community. And so the period of commitment the physician makes to the state is another 3 years. So the physicians that we work with in our program typically have a much longer experience with their employer than they would in some of the other J1 programs as well.
Awesome. So you mentioned again on the break that you had a story about someone, but it was from about 9 years ago. So how long have you guys been participating in this program, and how long do the residents typically stay?
You know, that's a good question. I'm not sure how long the total history of the program is. I'm sure that it's at least 20 years old. I've been involved in the administration of the program for about 12 years.
Okay.
And typically we essentially support a physician's petition to stay in the United States and work in Colorado about 15 times a year. Under the current federal law, we're allowed up to 30 slots per year. So we're actually underutilizing this program in Colorado. And we would gladly collaborate with employers that were looking for ways to increase the numbers because it would be nice to bring in the full capacity that's available to us in this program in the state to really serve our citizens for healthcare.
Wonderful. How do you typically get lifers? I for lack of a better term, really, people that tend to just, you know what, I really found a home here with this hospital, this office, I want to stay. Is that a typical outcome, or is that kind of an outlier?
You know, I think it's a more often than not outcome. I don't have the numbers readily available, but I would say probably more often than not, the physician, once their 3-year commitment is up, they will tend to stay in the community or at least stay in Colorado. And I can think of a physician now that was an immigrant from India, had worked under the J1 visa waiver program for 3 years. Once that commitment was up, they applied for permanent residency and received that. And now they're a medical director of a large practice in northeastern Colorado. And that physician has actually come back to us to serve on the board of another one of our practice incentive programs. And so he is really serving the state a second time by supporting the work that we do in a U.S.-trained loan repayment program called the Colorado Health Service Corps.
Wonderful. See, what a great setup,
Yeah.
And it was all through this program. You also mentioned something else that I thought was really kind of beautiful, and it's this integration because your residents are staying here a minimum of 3 years, typically longer, and so they probably have their families and stuff come with them. And you mentioned a really awesome story about a
Sure.
community.
Yeah, so we really endeavor to create long-term retention of clinicians in underserved communities. The ideal is that they spend an entire career serving that community. That's, of course, not always possible, but one of the ways that we can help encourage longer-term commitments is to really create a relationship of the physician, his or her family, and the community as a whole. And in southern Colorado, about 8 or 9 years ago, there was a physician from Pakistan that had come into the community, and the family was very excited to be there. The physician was very excited to go to work. The employer was very excited to have him. And his wife was only a little bit hesitant because she was concerned that she wouldn't be able to find some of the food items that were part of her cultural culinary tradition. And so they were able to work out an agreement with the local grocery store that store would start to carry 5 or 6 sort of key food items that would be available to her. And it really created a nice community investment in the success of this clinician placement. And last I checked, that physician was still there. It's been a few years, but since I've last checked in on him, but things had been going well. And so we always look for ways that the community themselves can kind of invest in that family and not simply think of it as a pure employment relationship, but really a way that that clinician becomes invested in the community, a participant, and a full 360 contributor to the community.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and you know, that it's when you go to work somewhere, right? I don't know about you guys, but when I go to work somewhere and I have to move, I want to make sure that my community around me is something that I want to be a part of too, right? I want to be there because it has a park nearby. They have really great schools, you know, things like that really are going to help me. And so I think that's just lovely that this grocery store, you know what, we'll carry those 5 or 6 items. It's no big deal. I'm sure somebody else in the community might benefit from that too, not just one family.
Sure.
Yeah.
If I can interject for just a second, that really is something that the State Department wants to see, because we want people to come to the United States and learn that we are people that are going to say, yes, we'll accommodate you. That, yes, you coming here will carry a couple other things to make you feel comfortable in our country. And that's one of the core parts of this. Now, it's educational, it's cultural exchange, but that's really what we want to show the world, is that we're accommodating people, and we want you to feel comfortable within our country.
Yeah, well, and it sounds like you're doing a pretty good job of that so far. We talked a little bit off air, Jeff, about technical placement and having the abilities that one needs in in their field. You mentioned a lady that you got from India, I want to say, who was helping you with software.
Yeah, exactly. So if you look at it from a couple different perspectives, from the business perspective at Geotech, we're looking at the J1 programs for filling needs that are also hard to fill domestically. So if we're looking at translating or doing local work, researching the markets so we can export, that fills a different type of intern. But then also on some of the technical skill sets that are hard to hire for, so a lot of the software or electronic type work, it's just really competitive, and for a small company it's hard to find someone at the rates that we could afford to pay. And so then you broaden your horizon and you're looking for people from out of the state of Colorado, and then you open up your search to the whole world. And a program like this J1 program allows you to bring people in from anywhere to come here to work on site. A lot of companies will offshore or move their manufacturing overseas or their software development to other countries. But this allows you to bring some talent in from a country that has good software developers to work on site with your team. So it's a great use of the program from a technical side of filling the needs you may have trouble sourcing or filling in the local marketplace, because the workforce it's tough right now. Unemployment's super low, and it's hard for us to hire skilled workers. So this is another option out there for employers to find talent, is to open the search globally.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. As you mentioned, we are at an all-time low for unemployment. We're below the national average at this point. And so you're right. This is a fantastic alternative if you are looking for, and not just someone that you're training, right? These people are already coming from the technical world. The lady that you mentioned, she already had a background in IT.
She had a master's in the field we were searching for, which would have been hard for us to source locally here.
Oh yeah, and the competitive rates that we have, particularly in IT. So that's a really great alternative that you've got there. That you were able to hire her and get the skilled labor that you needed, and when she goes back, you have connections.
Right. Yeah.
Wonderful. Anything else on this program that I might need to know more about? Is there? We talked about the minimum requirements for a business. Is there a minimum requirement if I have a student that I would like to be a part of the J1 program to come here? To the age limits, what type of education do they need? And you mentioned you run the gamut. We have healthcare. You mentioned STEM. Less on the creative side, but marketing I feel like is probably big in the creative space actually. So if I'm looking to put my student into the program, what kind of requirements are there?
Well, it's competitive. It's very competitive. One of the reasons, again, we're WorldDenver working on behalf of Cultural Vistas out of D.C., and one of the reasons they contracted us was because they said, we've just got too many people. We have the supply is huge, the demand is small, so we don't have the resources to know who's in Denver. who's in San Antonio, who's in Seattle. So they said, if you'll, discover that demand, we'll send people your way. So that is one of the issues right now. It's very, very competitive from the J1 side, but it's good for Colorado because we say, what do you want? We can find them.
Yeah.
It's not a situation where we have to say, Canada's so rare, we just can't do that. No, it's not the case at all. So from that perspective, I just say be as qualified as you can, be as open to time. Again, it is government work, and it's not always moving like clockwork, is what I'll say. But be flexible, and just have that readiness to go almost wherever you can. Be very open-minded, because I think a lot of people may want to work on the East Coast or West Coast, but they don't know what Denver is and how impactful Denver can be. So just be open-minded, I guess.
All right. I like that. What are you looking for J1 students?
Well, we typically don't directly interact with the students until they have found a successful placement with an employer. And so our connection typically takes place right when that physician has identified a position with an employer they want to work for. The employer has decided they want to make that hire. And so they connect with us to sort of go through the process of requesting a waiver of that home return requirement. So oftentimes an immigration attorney is involved. It's not absolutely essential, but 90% of the time that is the case. And they prepare essentially an application document to us, and we verify things like to make sure that it's a fair contract, that it meets the minimum standards, that the physician isn't being paid less than a U.S. trained physician, so to reduce the concerns that there is displacement of U.S. Clinicians for foreign trained physicians. We also look for the absence of a non-compete clause. So oftentimes employers will want to introduce a non-compete clause into a contract so that if the clinician were to leave employment before the term of the contract is up, or sometimes even after the contract, that they wouldn't stay in the same market. The reason that we asked employers not to include that is our goal is to improve capacity and access. And so that's the one exception that we ask them to make for us, because our goal is better service to the citizens of Colorado. And if that individual clinician decides to move from one clinic system to another, but it happens to be in the same town, we want to make sure that that community still retains the benefit of that clinician. So once that process is complete, then we file a petition packet with the U.S. Department of State and forward it on, and then we have really a 3-year relationship with that clinician and that employer. So we ask them to report to us twice a year, some basic practice characteristics about what they're doing and who they're serving, again to assure that the clinician is actually making an impact on care in the communities that they're working in. So we look at how many people they serve who are privately insured or publicly insured, and even uninsured, just to make sure that they are giving non-discriminatory support to the entire community.
Wonderful. Yeah. And Jeff, what have you looked for? What have you found with your J1 students, employees, I should say? I keep saying students. I don't feel like that's right.
Intern traineeships.
Intern traineeships, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, if you think about student recent graduates, I think some of the learning today, I didn't know about the medical use of the program for doctors, but that's a great use of a program like this. So it was great for me to learn about that, because I'm thinking about it from a business perspective.
Right.
And so small businesses or even medium or larger businesses in the Denver community can use this as a tool to place or move people internationally. And so the program's there, and it's great. So we're bringing folks in to learn about other cultures or markets so we can sell more of our products and export them overseas. And, in some cases, like with China, we did a program where we educated the Ministry of Environment in China on groundwater quality laws and testing. And so we used the J1 participant to help us translate and set up those meetings and prepare us for that. But then that's helped us grow our sales internationally. And our intern that worked with us there, he wasn't interested in staying on with us long term in China, and that's not always going to be the case. But he did take from the cultural exchange aspect of it. He is now in Asia a global microbrewery beer taster blogger. And so he does.
What a dream job.
Yeah. So, well, it's his own little, his own
Discovered that in Colorado.
little business. So he had a year and a
Yeah.
half, spent a year and a half in Denver, and so he learned a whole lot about microbrews, and it changed his life. And so now he's doing a tourism site in Asia on microbreweries that you can find in the region. So not as easy as finding one in the city of Denver, but he took that cultural spirit and what he learned about beer in Denver, and he's taken that across Asia. So he's having fun with that.
Oh, that's what a cool story, actually. Yes, because microbrews are definitely ingrained in our society here in Denver. I wonder if we have anybody who's growing marijuana in Amsterdam yet. You know,
It could happen.
So we have a few minutes here. I want each of you to let people know where they can get more information. And Jeff, I know that you guys are pretty hiring pretty consistently at Geotech. So give me more information where I can find you, what I can apply for.
Sure. Yeah, our website's geotechenv.com, and we are hiring. A lot of the manufacturing positions, we're a local manufacturer of environmental products. We export them internationally, as well as we contract manufacture parts for other people. So we have machine shop, extrusion lines, and we're making a lot of parts for other Colorado companies as well. So it's a great place to work, and we're also the temporary home of the World Trade Center and Denver Sister Cities. While that new building is going to be built there, we're collecting a lot of the nonprofits and activators that'll move to that site along with WorldDenver. So it'd be great.
Yeah, and it's already looking really good. I don't know if you guys have seen the plans, but it looks amazing.
Yeah.
So specifically, I know that the State Department has some resources where I can find for this J1 program, right?
Yep, so all of our program resources are posted online, and probably the easiest way for people to find us is just to search Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment J1 Visa Program, and it will take you right to our page where you can find information there. They can also call us at 303-692-2582, and we can refer them to a staffer that can kind of advise somebody through the application process and how to make use of this program.
Wonderful. And you don't have much information, right, as far as the visa or things that they may need to obtain. It's walking through the process, correct?
Walking through the process. So we're not a law office, and so we always recommend that they get their own immigration attorney, and then we can sort of facilitate the procedure kind of through the process of the employment contract, the petition to the state. Once our role is complete, then we sort of facilitate the transition of that position to the U.S. Department of State. And then once that process is complete, then we reconnect with them and enter into that 3-year relationship where we're checking in on them to make sure that they're providing the services that they agreed to provide.
Wonderful. And where can I find all the information about this program?
Right. Well, you can always Google U.S. Department of State J1 program. There's a lot of information there. But worlddenver.org is where you can find us in Denver. My contact info is on there. Again, it's john@worlddenver.org. Where we come in, I don't want to just want to say this is that, you know, a lot of the government hoops, the immigration lawyers and things like that, we do take care of a lot of that. We have, again, our partner in D.C., they have the lawyers, they have the experts. So we felt that, you know, it's, in some ways the government hoops you have to jump through, we're holding this process up. We take care of not all, but most of the government hoops. So I just wanted to get that out there. But yeah, we've got a lot of other cultural exchange programs. Again, the IVLP program we mentioned earlier. We've got a couple more YLIs around youth from Latin America that we do. If you want to, we do speaking events. You know, we're WorldDenver. Our mission is to connect Denver to the world, so that's where our name came from. So give us a call if you're interested in anything else like that. We have speaking events. We had a very successful one last night called Inside Putin's Head. I wasn't able to attend that.
Oh, that's disappointing. You couldn't go.
But again, give me a call if this is something anyone's interested in, and I'm happy to talk to you about it. So
yeah,
I look forward to that.
Thank you so much, gentlemen. It's been a pleasure having you on. What a great conversation, and hopefully we get some interns and trainees in their proper places, and we can bring up the Denver economy in the meantime. Well, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. Be sure to like and subscribe our YouTube page while you're here. Find this show and more at cobrt.com/radio-podcast. And while you're on the website, go ahead and sign up for our newsletter, check out our events page, and be sure to check out worlddenver.org for more information on the J1 program. Have a wonderful day, you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.